got the recording in progress. And then we're gonna try something new, like we mentioned earlier. We're gonna stream this event live on Facebook. And so I'm gonna get that going now as well. Get this on page. All right, so our event is getting started on the live stream on Facebook. This is new for us, so we're excited to get to host this month's TMN Tuesday as a Facebook Live event, but we're also going to be recording this WebEx event as well so that we can share this this program and the recording with you guys post-event, because Freya's got a lot of information and a lot of really exciting content. So you guys can come back and watch this at any point that that's convenient for you. So as we get started today, again, this is our TMN Tuesday, our third in our monthly series being hosted on the second Tuesday of every month. This TMN Tuesday opportunity is a chance for us as a program to share some exciting content, some current events, and some advanced training for our Master Naturalists. But TMN Tuesdays are not limited to just Master Naturalists in attendance. They are open to the public. Let your friends know about some of these exciting seminars and presentations that we have lined up on these Tuesdays each month. And with that, that's the lunch bell here in my hometown, which signals that it is noon. So we're going to get started as there goes the lunch bell.
Never any question what time it is.
Although it went off early, like 10 minutes early the other day, and I just threw me off a little bit. Somebody was really hungry that day. So again, welcome everybody to our TMN Tuesday event. As we get started today, you'll notice as an attendee on our WebEx event that attendees for the WebEx cannot unmute and cannot show their video. That is on purpose. We have over 300 folks already joining us and more on the way. And with so many different attendees, we want to make sure that we give our speaker the opportunity to share their content in the most efficient way possible. If you see my mouth moving, but you can't hear me, you can check your audio connection, and there's some instructions on the screen to do that with our WebEx event. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, welcome. This is new for us to be hosting this as a live stream on Facebook Live at the same time. And so your audio connection should be coming through your Facebook settings. For the program today, we're going to be using chat, not Q&A, but we're going to be using chat today. So feel free to ask your questions in chat. We are going to be moderating that chat room for Freya, and then as for our speaker today, as she has an opportunity to answer questions, we will be moderating and asking her those questions verbally so that she can respond verbally as well. And then just to help us as moderators of that chat room, please ask your questions in full sentences and clear sentences so that we make sure that we're asking the presenter the question that you are intending us to ask her. And then finally, and I'm going to leave this up here for just a quick second, but if you are joining us on our WebEx event, know that there is a help center, there is a website that you can go to. All of this is also linked on our TMN Tuesday page, and Michelle's going to drop that link for TMN Tuesday into the chat now so that you guys, if you are still having issues with your connection, hopefully you can get that link from the chat, or you can take a picture of this link on the screen here to moderate or to help manage your technical issues. All right, there we go. So as that's getting loaded, I'm going to go to the next page now. Hopefully you've had a chance to grab a picture of this if you're still having some technical issues. So as we have moved all of our workshops and our seminars to virtual platforms over the last year, it'll be a year this month. that our program has hosted virtual meetings and workshops and seminars. We have a virtual meeting room etiquette that we follow. So if you're joining us from Facebook and from WebEx, these apply for both types of attendees that we have joining us today. Our attendees are not able to unmute during the event. Please use the chat box to ask questions. Our chat function, Q&A function is open for on-topic discussion only. Please, if you are using the chat room, please make sure that you're staying on topic for the help of our speaker and for the other attendees joining us as well. Please be respectful and professional in all comments and questions, and use full sentences for those comments and questions so that we can make sure that we're understanding them and asking them to our presenter as you intend for us to ask them. This session will probably run a little over an hour. I didn't update this slide for that, but this might run just over a little over an hour today. Freya's got a lot of really excellent content, so we hope you can hang out just a little longer than the 1 p.m. Central hour with us. And then again, dropping that link again in the chat, as Michelle has done. Our FAQs and our WebEx resources are on our website as well. Michelle, and then today's event is pretty special. We've got the launch of a new program. Will you tell us a little bit about this?
Sure. So we're taking the opportunity with March's TMN Tuesday to launch a new series that we're working on called Be the Change, and it'll be our diversity series for the Master Naturalist program. The presentation today will actually launch this Be the Change series for our program, and it's dedicated to exploring diversity, equity, and inclusion in our natural resource community, and especially for our Master Naturalist program and chapters. One of the goals that we have with this Be the Change series is that we hope to be presenting all topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion for you, and continuing the conversation within and throughout our program on these topics to be the change in this area. And we are also working, another goal that we have with this series is we hope to have what we're calling a playbook at the end, where chapters may want to address, chapters in our natural resource community as a whole may want to address a specific item in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that they could maybe look to this book and pull out the play or the tips and techniques and resources shared from all these speakers to apply in that situation at their chapter level and even at our program level. Today's event will be launching a series that we're looking towards having about six different months, or 6 different topics, 6 different sessions over the next 6 months, that we will be providing a Be the Change presentation. So we anticipate the Be the Change series being in addition to our TMN Tuesdays. But like I said, we're taking the opportunity today with this TMN Tuesday to launch this series for our statewide program. And we'll move to the next slide. So we mentioned today's the actual launch of the series. We will pick up again in April. We anticipate the series running through September, and we're looking at the 3rd Tuesday of every month, tentatively based on speakers' availability for the event and for that time period. We're looking at these being around the lunch hour again, just like this. And slowly moving all of our kind of big events for the program happening on TMN Tuesdays. We're looking at 1 hour of advanced training. Sometimes there will be a little bit more involved with some of the sessions and what are presented. So minimum of 1 hour, it could be a little over that on some events. We have a set of tentative dates for you. And then one other thing I don't think we mentioned here is that we would like the entire series. We're kind of aiming at the entire series culminating in one big workshop to kick us off in the next year, 2022, to help put some of these things, help your chapters in your programs, natural resources programs, enact some of these things into your plans for the whole upcoming year.
Yep. And so more information is on our website, as this is just now launching today, exclusive today, launching this this new series. So I've dropped the link to this website, which is now live on this page that is now live on our website, and we'll be updating that and sharing it via our listserv over the next week or so. And so, go ahead, Michelle.
So today's speaker, joining us today are Virginia Rose and Freya McGregor from Birdability, and they will be discussing a topic of natural resources and making natural resources, and specifically birding, available for everybody and everybody. And some of the things that we need to think about as a natural resource community to make these events and this activity available, and something that everyone can participate in. Freya will be our main speaker today. Virginia will be joining us in the chat and online, but our connection to Freya was an exciting one, and her connection to the Master Naturalist program and Birdability. When I found out that when we were connected to Birdability through Freya, I was just so excited, because Freya has a long and rich history with our, well, maybe not so long, but a rich history with our Texas Master Naturalist program. After coming to the United States from Australia on a volunteer visa, she joined the Master Naturalist program and found a home. The Master Naturalist program in the Alamo area chapter, San Antonio area, became a new home and welcomed her with open arms. And that's something we like to see across all of our chapters. And those are the stories we want to hear from all of our members across all of our chapters. So Freya became a Master Naturalist through our Alamo area chapter. And through that time period, she and her parents would come to the United States and visit her. And over the course of that time, Freya's excitement for the Master Naturalist program made her parents excited, and got them interested in developing a Master Naturalist type program in Australia. And then continuing in Freya's journey as a Master Naturalist and in natural resources, she is the Birdability coordinator for their new organization. And I'll let Freya take it away from here. So thank you for being a part of today. And it's just so nice to have this, like, almost have a full circle with your involvement in the program. So thank you.
So thanks very much, Michelle and Mary Pearl. I just realized I can't share my screen.
No, I'm sharing that option now. I'm going to give you that option.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm Freya McGregor. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Aha, here we go. The control. This is what we want. And I'm really excited to be speaking with you all today. As Michelle said, I am Australian. I am a proud Texas Master Naturalist, unfortunately no longer certified because I married a soldier and the Army moves you. And so we haven't lived in Texas for 3.5 years. And so that's a real shame. But I was very excited to wear my badge again today for the first time in a long time. So Michelle asked me to speak a little bit about my Master Naturalist journey just before we jump into the birdability stuff. And there's my American soldier. I fell madly in love with him and moved to Texas from Australia 5 years ago. And one thing that happened really quickly was, I think we went to the San Antonio Zoo and there was a pollinator day and I couldn't legally work. I didn't know anybody. I just come over here because I was madly in love. I had a lot of free time on my hands, and we the apartment complex we lived in, the manager let us plant a butterfly garden, a pollinator garden in a common area. And so this was a hot, sweaty day, but we're pretty excited. We've got our pollinator plants in, and it was the start of a really beautiful experience. It turns out that connecting with nature for me really helps me feel like I'm connecting to my new place. And this has happened. I'm now living in the 4th state that I've lived in the US in 5 years. So this has happened a few times, but the first time was the most significant. And so I became a Texas Master Naturalist. This hilarious photo was taken the day I graduated. My t-shirt that I was given has still got creases in it because I put it straight on, didn't have time to do laundry. I went straight down to Mitchell Lake Audubon Center. And it was an owl prowl that night I was volunteering at. And these two folks, they're also now married. David on my right in that photo, he was one of my fellow students, and they came down and colored in the owl masks, which was the activity that I was helping with. And it was really exciting day one as being a real Texas Master Naturalist. And I did a lot of volunteering around birding, but also at the Butterfly Learning Center at Phil Hardberger Park with Mrs. Drake, Jeanette, and Karen, who were really important people for me. And the sense of community that I discovered, not knowing anyone, like I said, it was amazing to find that if someone's interested in nature and they want to spend their time volunteering to make it better or to encourage others to get interested in nature, you've always got something to talk about with them. And the sense of community was so important, and I really missed that sense moving. Somehow the Army doesn't consider if there are active Master Naturalists in the states that they keep sending us to. I don't know. So I'm excited. Maybe our next duty station there'll be a Master Naturalist organization that I can tap back into again. But anyway, I'm very, very excited to be here. Oh, and then as Michelle mentioned, my parents had been really interested in this. They've done a huge amount of organising and volunteering in community-based environmental grassroots level back home in Melbourne. And just a couple of years ago, the Nature Stewards started up. So I'm wearing my Nature Stewards t-shirt today, which is based on the Master Naturalist model with introductory level broad training about nature and a little bit about interpretation and volunteering, and then it's really exciting to watch that grow from over here on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. So you never know what's going to happen when you invite someone in and include them. Ooh, I might have to quote myself on that because that's really important. All right, anyway, let's get into birdability. So I'm the birdability coordinator and occupational therapist. And just really quickly, occupational therapy is a healthcare profession, and it's all about enabling people to do things that are meaningful to them, but that they can't do because of an injury, an illness, a disability, or a mental illness. And we can enable people to participate by modifying the physical, social, cultural, institutional environments, by adapting the task or providing adaptive equipment, and by teaching the person or the people around them new skills. Birding is a really meaningful activity for a lot of people, including me. And so I think you'll see pretty quickly why it's kind of relevant that I'm an occupational therapist. My background as an OT is in blindness and low vision services. But enough about me. In this photo, I want you to just think about what you can see in this photo to get us started. What I can see a bunch of people who are wheelchair users. I can see that there are two very different looking wheelchairs, more modified for outdoor kind of off-road maybe use. I can see that there's a concrete flat trail, maybe a really good accessible trail, and at least one of the wheelchair users is not on it, so he can manage off it, but a lot of wheelchair users need that paved surface. I can also see someone standing, and it's really important to remember that not every disability is visible. People may not be using adaptive equipment or have anything about their body that tells you that they have a disability or other health concern, so that's really important to know. they've also all got binoculars, and apparently there's at least a couple of birds that they're looking at. So I really like this photo. This was taken in Tucson, Arizona. So what's this got to do with anything? Well, we know a few things that help us understand why this is an important conversation. We know that time spent in nature is good for us. There's been so much research that tells us that it reduces anxiety, it can reduce feelings of depression, it can lower blood pressure, it can increase attentional capacity. Most people, I think, inherently know that if you spend a weekend camping or go for a quick walk, even just in your neighborhood with some trees, you often come back feeling a bit more refreshed and relaxed. Nature is good for us, and birds can be the gateway to nature. They have really bright colors, they make lots of funny noises, they can fly. Like, how cool is that? And so for a lot of people, birds are the reason that they start really interacting with nature and spending time in nature. And they might be the kind of excuse to be out in nature. We also know that birding is the fastest growing leisure activity in the US, and this data is 20 years old, and there's been a massive spike in popularity of birding since more people in the last 12 months have spent more time at home and not able to travel as far. And there's lots of different birding related organizations have seen a huge increase in interest and engagement, and the optics manufacturers are like all out of stock because everyone's buying binoculars. But 20 years ago, there was 85 million Americans who participated in birding. And so that number is for sure way higher now. So that's really cool. And it also shows it has a pretty big appeal. So that's really interesting. We know that birding has the potential to be inclusive and accessible, but there's more work to be done. We also know that 1 in 4 Americans have a disability. 25%, like, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people who maybe aren't becoming master naturalists because they don't think, or definitely aren't able to access the training, or who are worried that they won't be able to volunteer. And that's a lot of people who, if you run interpretive programs and things, may not be coming to your events. We know that there are 20 million people with a mobility challenge and 7 million who are blind or have low vision. So this is a lot of folks. This is not like a minor population. This is a lot of people. We also know that we're talking about our future selves. It's not a conversation about able-bodied, sighted, neurotypical hearing people and people with disabilities, like over on that side of the room. This is all of us. This was really made clear to me 18 months ago when I woke up one day and couldn't straighten my knee. It's now, I'm labeling it a dodgy knee because none of the specialists have been able to diagnose anything wrong, but there's definitely something wrong. And it causes me discomfort, sometimes pain, and I can't go birding in the way that I would like because of it. So I have an accessibility challenge there, and that just happened one day randomly. So as we all get older, maybe slowing down a little bit, maybe there's a medical diagnosis in your future. I don't want to be pessimistic, just realistic. Maybe cancer, maybe lupus. That diagnosis was thrown around for me last year for a bit. Who knows? But we're not talking about this other group of people that we're not a part of. We're talking about everybody. And when we can be inclusive, we're also being inclusive of ourselves. I really like this quote from Virginia. The best we can be is waiting for us in nature. Doesn't everyone deserve a chance to find the best they can be? So Virginia is the founder and president of Birdability, and she is a retired high school teacher in Austin. And she's been a birder for 17 years. She also had a horse riding accident when she was a teenager, which resulted in a T10 spinal cord injury, which means she cannot move or feel her legs. And so she uses a manual wheelchair to get around. But when she discovered birding, she also discovered a lot of different difficulties on the trails that she was trying to use to go birding. Parking was an issue often. gates, all different kinds of gates. Not everyone is able to bend underneath gates like that, and there's lots of different kinds of gates that don't necessarily allow wheelchair users to get through. Bathrooms, there's so much in bathrooms. There's so many components that make up an actually accessible bathroom. Steps and curbs, railings. We're going to talk a bit more about that, but as you can see in that photo, not all railings are ideally placed or designed for someone who is seated in a wheelchair to see through or over. Mud and sand, maybe not important if you're mountain biking and the wheels are down there and you don't really have anything to do with them. But if you're a manual wheelchair user and you're wheeling down a trail and your wheels get covered in mud, that's going to end up on your hands. And if you're trying to use binoculars, now your binoculars are covered in mud. That's not optimal. In Texas, cattle guards, cactus vines, cow patties. Virginia tells me that she has had a puncture at least once from a prickly pear, I think, spine in her tires. So this is not a joke. And all of these things by themselves individually and together create a lack of independence. Maybe independence isn't something that you think is all that important, but for Virginia, she wants to be able to go out birding by herself. That's important. She doesn't want to have to invite a friend. She wants to be able to spend that alone time in nature. And so the independence thing is really important for a lot of people. But she says, difficulty and uncertainty lead to empowerment and joy. What an amazingly positive approach. This is a really gorgeous photo of Virginia and her sister. They just had this gorgeous time birding in Big Thicket National Preserve over in East Texas. And I really love it because they're so excited, so happy. But the other thing I want you to notice here, Virginia drives this is her van. The driver's seat's removed and she can drive with hand controls, but the ramp to get in and out of her van comes out the side of her van. And this is really important because those diagonal lines in that parking spot, that's a van accessible parking spot. And if that's not available, or if someone else parks over those diagonal lines, she can't get in and out of her van, which means she can't even access that trail, even if it's a perfect trail. So parking is really important. But anyway, I just love this photo and the excitement and empowerment that's happened on this birding trip for Virginia. Because in amongst the empowerment, she's also discovered the fun of learning about birds, the friendships created, travel opportunities up to Ohio, to McGee Marsh, or even just half an hour down the road to a place you hadn't visited before. The physical health benefits of birding, being outside and exercising, confidence, independence. This is amazing. Community. Community is so valuable, and having people who share similar interests and values as you, like I said before, for me and the Master Naturalists, huge stuff. A purpose, something to do, a meaningful activity, and of course the birds. How much joy is just in the birds. She says, no one can predict what an individual with an accessibility challenge can or cannot do. And I think that's really important to know as well. Don't make assumptions. Invite people in and let them show you what they can do. So, Birdability, brand new nonprofit, 7.5 weeks old. Who's counting? It's really exciting. Birdability focuses on removing barriers to access for birders with mobility challenges, blindness or low vision, intellectual or developmental disabilities, including autism, mental illness, being deaf or hard of hearing, and other health concerns, because we believe that birding is for everybody and everybody. So how are we going to do this? We want to address the physical accessibility of birding locations. We want to educate the birding community on ways to be welcoming and inclusive, because any occupation you participate, any activity that you participate in happens within the context of a social and cultural environment. And if the trail is fantastic, but all the people using it are not, that's still maybe not a great it's not inviting someone to participate in birding, because we want to then introduce birding to people who have disabilities who aren't birders yet, so that they too can experience those joys that Virginia found when she started birding. So, physical accessibility. There's a really good reason I'm going to talk to you about this, so listen up. The access considerations, by the way, there's more information about all of these things I'm going to talk about on our website. This particularly is found under guidance documents and access considerations. So what sort of features, there's a lot of trails that are labeled accessible, but they really aren't actually accessible when you sort of know a little bit about what to look for. So this is really important stuff. The parking, like I mentioned, and specifically the van parking is really important. Trail information, knowing ahead of time from the state park or the nature centre's website what the trail is going to look like for you when you get there. And at the trailhead, really good maps and signage at the trailhead that we're going to have a little trip down Echo River Spring Trail here, which is in Kentucky, which is where we used to live before we moved to Alabama. This is my favorite accessible trail, and this signage here has information about the surface and the cross slope and the gradient, which is really, really helpful to know. It also has this really great map which shows people the different accessibility features and trails that are going to come off this trail. When you get to this like intersection and where this paved trail ends and changes, similar signs are found there too, telling you if you continue on this trail, this is what the surface looks like, and this is what the gradient looks like. And these signs should be available at every trailhead and at every trail intersection. My accessibility challenge, I don't need the trail to be perfectly flat or concrete. I can walk over some obstacles, but I can't climb like really crazy, intense, steep, rocky trails, and some days my knee just doesn't feel that good, and I do actually want it to be more flat without anything to scramble over. So there's a huge range of different accessibility challenges, and this information at every trail and at every trail intersection, it can be so valuable for people. The surface of the trail, the width, so that someone who's using a wheelchair can pass someone else who's using a wheelchair without one of them falling off the trail. The slope or gradient is important. The cross slope, you know, if you were kind of in one spot, if you're kind of on a tilt, that's the cross slope. Steps or other obstacles, roots, rocks. Virginia, in her wheelchair, if there's just one step is enough, that she can't manage that trail anymore by herself, and she's going to need a friend or a random passerby to help. That makes that not an accessible trail. The idea is that you can do it by yourself. Bathroom accessibility, like I said before, there's heaps that go into bathrooms, but this photo at this trailhead, there's two portaloos. There's one regular one and there's one that's wheelchair friendly. And if there's a regular portaloo at any place, there really should be a wheelchair friendly one as well. And if you can only afford one portaloo, make it a wheelchair friendly one. I mean, I definitely would rather use a wheelchair friendly portaloo because it's so much bigger. I don't have to touch the walls. But when you include everybody benefits. Bird blinds, there's a lot that goes into bird blinds. If you've ever used a bird blind, you'll know that there's lots of different designs. But this bird blind, which happens to be here in Alabama, there's different windows at different heights, which is great for different people of different heights. And there is also that window on the bottom left that's sort of half open. That's exactly the right height for someone who's seated, like if they're a wheelchair user. Pull-outs are really helpful. That little kind of bit over on the side so that someone in a wheelchair or on a scooter, someone who has chronic fatigue or chronic pain, who's maybe going a bit slower, a parent or carer with a stroller, they can get out of the way from others using the trail and not feel like they're in the way or not get like walked into or touched. Really, really helpful. And interpretive signs, having good contrast between the text color and the background is really important. But this sign, it's talking about the floodplains and the sycamore trees, and it has a tactile feature up in the top right where you can feel kind of the texture of a sycamore tree's trunk. I got a kick out of that. That's really fun. I'm not blind. I don't have low vision. I don't have a print disability, but I enjoyed that. It increased my level of engagement and the learning that I came away from that sign with. So having tactile features is really helpful for a lot of different people. The other really cool thing is having audio, the ability to hear the sign. Some places might have like an audio tour you can loan out from the visitor center, but that doesn't help you if the visitor center is closed. Or they might have like a scannable QR code and you can use your phone to listen. But at this trail, there is no reception at all. So this little pole on the right next to the sign is solar powered, amazing. And if you press the button just below the speaker, it reads you the sign. So good, so good. Maintenance is really important. Just because you've built an accessible trail doesn't mean it will always stay accessible. I know it doesn't really snow in Texas except for the other week, but we used to live in Boston, so I know about snow and the ploughing schedule. Leaves is really important. If there's a lot of leaves on the trail, especially in fall, maybe not, well, anyway, I've been to this really great trail where there was such a thick carpet of leaves that someone who used a wheelchair or a walking frame, or maybe had slower gait or shuffling gait because maybe they had Parkinson's disease, it would not have been a safe or enjoyable trail for them to use in that state. So maybe that place needed to do a bit more on the leaf removal and the key, month or something where most of the leaves fall down. And vegetation. Just because a trail was built, 32, 64 inches wide, whatever width it was when it was built, if the vegetation is coming in and encroaching on that trail surface, that trail functionally isn't really that wide and people might not be able to get past or even use it at all. So maintenance is really important. And then railings and barriers. This is back at Echo River Springs Trail. I always get those words turned around, in Kentucky. And when I first walked past, I was like, oh no, they're really beautiful new fancy trail. It's already broken. Like the barrier's already messed up. I'm going to have to find a ranger and let them know this is really sad. And I walked over to discover that those two sections of that barrier are actually plexiglass. Why is that important? Well, you saw that photo of Virginia earlier, peering in between two railings. And so someone who's seated, often like the other railings on that barrier, really kind of deep, often people who are seated you can't see through it and you can't see over or under it. And so there's many different designs for railings and barriers like this, but the best way of doing it is to remove the obstacle completely, like having this plexiglass. Keep the barrier, you don't want people falling off the cliff, but removing that obstacle to accessing the view. It means people who are seated in wheelchairs or scooters, or people who need to have a rest on their walking frame seat can see out. It means little toddlers can run up and see out and not have to be like peering through like a jail bar. It means people like me with my dodgy knee can have a sit on that bench and enjoy the full view, not just the little bit that I can just sort of vaguely peer over. So there's a lot when determining if a trail really is accessible or not. Why is this important to you, you might be asking? Well, we have this amazing resource called the Birdability Map. It's currently hosted by National Audubon, and it's crowdsourced, which means anyone can help contribute to it. When you get there, you can toggle around. Those yellow diamonds indicate that someone has submitted a Birdability Site review for that location. If there's a number in it, it means there's multiple in that spot. And as you kind of zoom in using the plus over on the right, they'll start to kind of spread out. And to submit a site review, this is so that people who have accessibility challenges can find out all that accessibility information ahead of time when they go to visit a birding location. Not just trails, but also bird blinds, observation platforms, maybe the feeder station next to a visitor center at a state park or something. And so anyone can contribute to this. Please do. As there's more and more sites getting added all the time, and the more that are there, the more useful this resource will be for people with accessibility challenges and for people who are trying to be inclusive, leading accessible, interpretive hikes or bird outings in their local area. So you click on that yellow Submit a Birdability Site Review, and up pops this checkbox survey. it looks kind of long, but that's because we have all these photos in it to help you through. And it only takes, once you know what's going on, once you know what to look for, it really only takes about 5, maybe 10 minutes to complete. So it looks big, but it's not. Don't be intimidated. You already learned all about those accessibility features just now. A lot of the questions don't have photos either, so they look a bit like this. You just check the box, and if there's anything else to add, click other and type it in. Your best guess is fine. We want people to be able to do this. If you don't know if the trail is shaded because you're there doing a site review in the winter and there are no leaves, that's all right, write that down. But if there's no trees, or you could say maybe it's probably pretty shaded, but I can't tell right now. But maybe you're on a bike path. There's one near my house where there are no trees for ages on either side of the bike path. It's not shaded in summer. There's never going to be shaded. So, you can just have your best guess. The other thing to know is that a trail doesn't need to be like the most perfect, like 1000% accessible to submit to the Birdability Map. Most trails are not. So as long as it's like reasonably accessible, please put it in. People like me, people with all different kinds of accessibility challenges will be grateful for the information about all the other accessibility features of that birding location. And when you submit that site review, it populates the map immediately, which is very rewarding. And this is this trail that you've seen a bunch of photos from. And anyone can come and zoom into that yellow diamond and scroll down and read all that information. We are working with National Audubon right now. Right at this moment, you can't link directly from your website to a Birdability site review like this. There isn't like a web address you can link to, but we're working with National Audubon at this very moment, and they've told us that should be available really, really soon. So if you're running a bird outing or a native plant hike or something, in your write-up of the event, you can say, for accessibility information, please see, this link, and you could link straight to the Birdability Map, to the site review that you already did, so that people can learn about it. And it means that other people who aren't going on your outing, if it lives on the Birdability Map, other people can also access that information as well. So please, a wonderful, wonderful thing to do to submit site reviews to the Birdability Map. All right, total change of direction here. This is my mission, one of my personal missions, to redefine birding. Growing up in Australia, we always talked about bird watching, and birding always seemed like a kind of an American term, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that we're Australian. We're, a different group of people. But I would like to challenge all the birders out there to, instead of using bird watching, I would like to challenge you to use birding. We have the choice about what language we use in our everyday life, and I would really love to see a shift in the whole birding community's language choice about this, because my definition is that birding is the act of enjoying wild birds. You don't need to see them. That means someone who's blind or has low vision can be birding. You don't need to hear them. That means someone who's deaf or hard of hearing could be birding. You don't need to be walking on a trail. You don't need to be even anywhere near a trail. You can be birding from your window. I bird from my windows all the time at home. People bird from their computers on webcams and Nest cams and stuff. So when we talk about birding as the act of enjoying wild birds, we're including all different ways of engaging in this activity, and we're including all different people who engage with this activity. While we're redefining birding, let's not talk about ourselves or anyone else as bird watchers, because not everyone watches. Let's talk about birders. Because with such a broad definition, anyone who enjoys wild birds is a birder. The other people we're including in this is beginner birders. And if you're a birder, you may be familiar with beginner birders not really being sure. Like a lot of times you're like, oh, so how long have you been a birder? And they're like, oh, I don't know if I'm a birder yet. I've only been doing it for 6 months. They haven't like become qualified to be a birder. I mean, what qualification is there? There's no like requirement to have done 40 hours of birding, for example, or 8 hours of advanced training to be a birder. You don't have to have been doing it for 3 years. Like, there's no point at which you like suddenly morph into a birder. If we use that definition of birding as the act of enjoying wild birds, anyone who does that can be a birder. And why not just be so inclusive in our language choice? Let's not talk about bird walks, because not everybody walks. Let's talk about bird outings and field trips as well, because that also includes all different kinds of things, like going to a bird blind and sitting there for an hour and seeing what shows up, or a group of you all in a van or a minibus driving through farmland and looking out birding over the fields. That's not walking. So it's really, I mean, these word swaps, you might say, well, it doesn't really matter, but it's too hard. It's not too hard. As an Australian, I've had to do a lot of word swaps in my everyday language to be more clearly understood by Americans. And it's a little annoying at first, but if people understand what I'm saying the first time, it just makes things so much easier. So I don't talk about boots of cars anymore, because no one here knows what I'm talking about. You'll think I'm talking about shoes. I'm talking about the trunk. But if I say trunk in Australia, people think I'm talking about like an old school suitcase thing, or like an elephant's like facial appendage. So word swaps are easy. Word swaps are really easy, and it's such an easy way to be more inclusive of everyone. While we're on language, there's a lot of people who aren't really sure about the right language to use when talking with or about people with disabilities. So we've got more information on our website about inclusive language use, but a real quick rundown. Handicapped, impaired, no more. They are out of date. Talk about people having a disability or that they are disabled. Don't use normal. That's strange anyway. What even is normal? Don't say normal. Say, if you're describing someone without a disability, say they're able-bodied or sighted or hearing or neurotypical. Don't say wheelchair bound. People aren't bound by their wheelchair. In fact, the wheelchair is a tool that enables people to do and see and move so much more than if they didn't have a wheelchair. People aren't bound by their wheelchair. It's an amazing thing, and it also implies that without their wheelchair, like, they're nothing, which is so wrong and so disempowering. Don't say wheelchair bound. Say they're a wheelchair user, because they use a wheelchair. Same as like I use a bike to get around sometimes. And don't say vision impaired, because we're tossing out impaired, right? So don't say vision impaired, say someone is blind or has low vision. Low vision, even though it sounds like kind of weird, it's actually got a very specific meaning. So in this context, so yeah, not vision impaired, someone is blind or has low vision. So it's not enough to just think you're being inclusive. You have to be intentionally inclusive. Sometimes this costs organizations more money. Often this takes more time and more effort. But it's sort of like if you're on Facebook and someone sends out an invite to, like in a non-COVID time, an invite to a barbecue they're having this weekend out to all their friends, and you're like, oh yeah, cool, I guess I might go, whatever. But if they send that like specifically, like, hey Freya, I hope you'll come to this. Oh, you specifically want me there. Oh, wow. Oh, that feels really nice. That's intentionally inclusive, and it's a big difference to just kind of assuming people know they're welcome than going out of your way to make sure they know they're welcome. So now this is about bird outing leaders, but this applies to anyone leading any kind of interpretive hike or interpretive program, whether you're moving or not. So what can people do? This also applies to everybody, whether you're leading an outing or not. So welcoming and inclusive bird outing leaders. You can start your bird outing with a welcome statement, including your pronouns and behavioural expectations. This might be something like, hi, I'm Freya. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm really excited that you're here today. If you're a beginner birder, please know you're very welcome. I don't know everything about birding and birds, and no one does. So if you have any questions, please ask me or anyone else. They'll be happy to help you. Hint, hint, everybody else, you're expected to help and be nice and kind. you know, and it's amazing how just sort of being intentional about setting the scene and making sure people feel welcome can make a really big difference. Don't single someone out because of a difference unless it is relevant. And if you have to do that, try and do that one-on-one. That's, you know, that means something like, don't say, oh my gosh, so exciting to see a wheelchair user here today. Thanks. Or else I'm just here as a birder, you know, like, and as an Australian, I often get singled out. And actually, when I'm going on a bird outing, I just kind of want to go birding. I'm happy to teach you about Australian stuff, but like, can we do that later? Because right now I'm trying to find the birds. So if you have to do it one-on-one, it might be something like, maybe you have a wheelchair user on your bird outing, and you might say something like, hey, to them separately, quietly, you know, hey, up ahead, I know there's a bit with a few steps, like, let me know if you want me to help, or like, we can change our route. If when we go up the steps, we can come back down, like, you know, you let me know. But do that privately, like not in front of the whole group. That's just awkward. Offer help, but be prepared to graciously accept no. Some folks will really appreciate being offered help, but plenty of people know how to do it themselves and they don't need your help. So if they say, oh no, thanks, I've got it, don't force your help. But also, don't get all kind of like hoiked up about it, like, oh, well, fine, I'm just trying to be nice. That's not very welcoming of you. They said no, like, just be like, oh, cool, yeah, no worries. Well, hey, let me know if you do need help later. And if they say, yes, I'd love help, don't just jump in and do what you think they need help with. Ask them, what help do you need? And let them be the guide, because they're expert about them. Believe someone if they ID a bird. And then a different way of framing that is trust but verify. It isn't fun. A beginner birder, a birder with a disability, a birder from Australia, when you're like, hey, look, there's an American redstart over there, and someone else in the group is like, oh, is there really? Yeah, there is. I know, I can see it. I'm actually a pretty decent birder, even though you are assuming that I know nothing because I have a different accent than you. It doesn't feel really good. Instead, say something like, oh, is there? That's super cool, let's see. And then like go check it out. That's the trusting but verifying. And if it's not an American redstart, you can encouragingly explain like why that was a different bird. Don't just assume someone doesn't know. And take into account someone's needs, but without making a big deal of it. For example, if everyone's sort of standing around chatting about some interesting bird that you think you might have just seen, and maybe you've got your field guides or your apps out looking at it, but there's a couple of picnic tables like just over there, and you know someone in the group has chronic fatigue or has a dodgy knee, you could say, hey everyone, let's just bring this conversation, like let's go and sit at these tables so we can all like be comfortable. Don't say, so Freya can rest her knee, because I don't want to be like blamed for that. Like just include without making a big deal of it. It's very appreciated. Don't force someone to opt out. Go out of your way to allow them to opt in. So what can you do as a Master Naturalist chapter, maybe at the Audubon Centre you volunteer at, any kind of organisation? What do welcoming and inclusive organisations do? Well, they hold accessible bird outings and other programs as part of the regular programming, not like a special, oh, we're doing it once a year, aren't we good? Just as part of your regular programming, and include that accessibility information that we talked about earlier in the write-up of the program. Even better when you'll be able to link straight to the Birdability Map. Include image descriptions for social media posts and alt text for images on your website. This is relevant for people who are screen reader users. Often those are folks who are blind or have low vision. And screen reader software reads aloud information on a computer screen, like website content or emails, but it can't just like read a photo. So you have to tell it what to say. It's really easy to do. Have a look at our website and you'll find a blog post that I wrote a couple of weeks ago about how to do this. Yes, it takes you a little bit more time, but that's this thing about being intentionally inclusive. Include Zoom captions for all webinars and meetings, even if no one has asked for them. This is that thing about forcing people to opt out versus inviting them to opt in. A lot of people who are deaf or hard of hearing need captioning, but there's also a lot of other folks who enjoy it too. Maybe someone has a migraine and they don't want to hear the noise, but they could follow along with the event if they could read it. Maybe they've got a little baby sleeping and they'd rather read it than hear it. Or maybe someone has a funny accent and it would just help you to just sort of read along what that person is saying so you didn't miss a word. So, and that, even if no one has asked for them, if you're just doing this, you're allowing people to opt in. If someone needs Zoom captions, they've got, and at this point, like 12 months into the pandemic, they will have asked so many times, hey, will you be providing Zoom captions? It's exhausting. And a lot of people will just be like, you know what, it doesn't say they have captions, so like, I'm just not even going to bother. Like, that's such a shame. So having those captions available for anyone who needs them, like, you're sending such a strong message. Remove financial barriers to access whenever possible. It's not always possible, but maybe if you normally have a webinar that's like $5 or $10 for participants, maybe you could make a pay what you will sort of option. Perhaps if you have a program, a summer camp, something, you know, a big, even just a one-day event in person, scholarships, many scholarships, maybe you can find grant funding or sponsorships to help cover those costs. A lot of people with disabilities have additional financial barriers, and a lot of people who are Black, Indigenous, or people of colour as well experience financial barriers. So when you can remove them, you're just making your programming and everything more inclusive and accessible. And provide honorariums. Oh, someone's just asked, sorry, I haven't been able to look at the chat, but I just saw that question. Someone asked, what are Zoom captions? So on like a Zoom webinar, closed captions are those things that like subtitles, if you've ever watched a movie in a different language, that come across the bottom of the screen and it just says in text what people are saying out loud, so that someone who is, usually the people who really appreciate this are people who are deaf or hard of hearing and they can't hear what's being spoken, but they can read it. So that's what, sorry, thank you for the question. That's what captions are. So captions, Zoom captions are just captions on Zoom. They require an extra expense. They're not built into Zoom, which is a really big problem. And Zoom is actually in a lawsuit right now because they haven't done the work to be accessible and inclusive. So, but yeah, at the moment, you need to go out of your way to get Zoom captioning in your online programming. But please do. Yeah, so providing honorariums for speakers and consultants. This is really important. This shows that you respect them enough to pay them for their time. And it's not really cool necessarily to, especially people who have disabilities or who are BIPOC, to just expect them to give you their time and emotional labor or professional skills for free. It's not a good thing. And so honorariums are really important and they're really appreciated. Apart from anything else, it says to that person, hey, I value what you're going to teach about or talk about or share about so much that I want to like offer you something in return. Consultants, I wrote there because maybe the state park you volunteer at is building a new accessible trail and you want community engagement and you want a bunch of people with different disabilities in the community to come and tell you what they need and what they would like and to test it out, and that's amazing. That's so good. Please do that. Please also provide them with some kind of honorarium for their time, because yeah, it's not really fair to just expect free labor. And if you haven't budgeted for it, well, budget for it next year. You can put that in the budget. All right, so we have a lot of resources for birders who have disabilities and other health concerns as well. We have the Birdability Map, which you already met. We have a webpage on our website about adaptive birding equipment. It's really cool. There's write-ups about Virginia's wheelchair mounted scope, excuse me, and there's bird identification apps that are screen reader accessible, so people who are blind or have low vision can use them too. There's heaps of stuff, and the more I learn, the more people tell me what they use, the more I can add to it. So I know a few people have said that's been really helpful for them. We have a Facebook group. You're welcome to join if you are interested in engaging and doing this sort of work, called Birdability Birders. We have the Birdability blog, where we're going to be sharing other birders' stories about their experiences birding with disabilities and other health concerns, in the hopes that able-bodied, sighted, hearing, neurotypical birders will learn, and also so that other birders with similar disabilities maybe get some good ideas for their own birding as well. We have virtual programs this Saturday. In fact, we have a monthly virtual accessible field trip partnership with Georgia Audubon. It's not specific to Georgia. We always have 4 hosts, someone in Georgia, Virginia, or me, which is Texas or Alabama, and then 2 other guest co-hosts who are from all over the US, who have different kinds of accessibility challenges. And we're birding on accessible trails, talking about those accessibility features. And we're finding birds, and you get to go birding in 4 places at once. So if you'd like to join us this week, the information is on our website under events, and you can find the registration link there. We have a lot more virtual programs in the works as well. And we have ideas, tips and tricks, all kinds of things on our website. And like I said before, more is being added all the time. Our services, Virginia and I, that's how big we are, brand new, 7-week-old non-for-profit. We can do guest speaking like right now to your chapter or to other organizations, and we can provide training to bird outing leaders and other interpreters and volunteers and staff about being more welcoming and inclusive. And we also offer consulting services for trails and bird blinds and more. Like I said, the bird blinds in particular, there's so many various designs that, you know, just sort of, it may be helpful to run a design past us just to make sure that it really is as accessible as you're kind of hoping that it will be. So hopefully at this point, you're really excited about being welcoming and inclusive and making birding in the outdoors as accessible as possible. So what can you do? You can contribute site reviews to the Birdability Map. Amazing, very helpful, doesn't take that long. You can advocate for accessibility improvements in your community. We have, on our website, we have a template that you might want to borrow and use in an email. Always do it in a positive way. Like, hey, I was using your trail the other day and I noticed that there was this bit that wasn't really great, and I'd really love it if maybe there's a way we could address this so that everyone can come. Don't go to them complaining, because you probably just like turn them right off from the start. Do it in a positive way, like how can we make this better for everybody? Share our resources with anyone who you think might benefit. That's the whole reason we're doing this. We're trying to help. So please share. And sign up for a monthly newsletter so you can keep up to date with new resources, with new programs, with new blog posts from our Birdability blog. And follow us on Instagram, Facebook or Twitter at Birdability, and share our posts again with anyone who you think might benefit, or anyone who you just want to tell about our work. That's very appreciated, especially right now as we're just getting started. And because we're just getting started, donations are so appreciated. So big or small, if you or your organization or your chapter or anybody you know finds any benefit or wants to help support our work, or if you information that we have helps you do your work, it's awkward to ask, I have to get used to it, please consider donating to us. You can do that on our website as well, and that's really, really appreciated, because birding is for everybody and everybody. There's my email address again, info@birdability.org. Please send me an email if you've got things to add to the adaptive birding equipment page, or if you would like to collaborate with us on consulting or anything like that. And yeah, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, we're there as well. So that's the end of that presentation. I think I am only 2 minutes past the hour. Yahoo! But if there are questions, I would love to hear them. And if you all have to go, please do. But if you want to stick around, as long as there are more questions and more people wanting to ask me, I'll be here. So thank you very much.
Incredible, Freya. Thank
Freya.
you so very much.
We've got a couple questions that in the chat that I'll moderate for you. So the first question that came in, there's a lot of statements and then there's a couple questions. So the first question that came in is, what are ways that master naturalists can help with making trails accessible where paving is not possible?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, things like removing any obstacles like rocks and roots and all that vegetation. Trails don't have to be paved to be accessible, but the flatter and smoother the surface, the better. If you have a look on our website under guidance documents and access considerations, there's a bit more of an explanation in there, but yeah, clearing obstacles is really helpful, and making sure the trail is at least ideally 32 inches wide. That's the Americans with Disabilities Act has all the like very specific guidelines about accessibility of public buildings, and it states that any space that someone needs to pass through, whether that's a doorway or like a gate, should be 32 inches wide. And that's so that someone in a wider wheelchair can get through. That's about as wide as they come. So that's sort of the like optimal width of a trail, if not wider, so people can pass each other. So what else can master naturalists do? Well, that signage stuff and contributing to the Birdability Map, even though that's not doing something to the trail, that's telling people about what the trail is. And that is really, really helpful. Let's see, if master naturalists could help with interpretive signage, or even like that audio component of interpretive signage. I know I've been, where was that? A state park up in North Texas where there was a interpretive trail. It didn't have signs, it had like the number spots, and there was a pamphlet that someone could pick up at the start. So maybe working on an interpretive, like that audio component of interpretive signage. Yeah, there's lots of different things. If you have an idea and you're not sort of sure how to like flesh it out, yeah, send me an email. I'd love to kind of help you with it.
And there's lots of resources that address that on your website, right?
Yeah.
So the next question that came in was, does the Americans with Disabilities Act address state and national park access to trails and amenities directly? For example, is there a percentage of trails required to be disability friendly?
No. So the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's supposed to apply to all new public buildings. A lot of buildings are built that do not uphold the standards though. But there's, on our website, you'll find a link to, there's the US Forest Service have, that's sort of pulled from the ADA, what they consider an accessible trail, and the kind of the same sort of guidelines, but for trails. There isn't a requirement for, every state park must have one trail that's at least half a mile wide. There's nothing like that. But the other thing to know about the Americans with Disabilities Act is that the guidelines in there should be considered a minimum requirement, because often they don't address things like bird blinds and trails, but they're also just kind of, there's, like I was explaining with all those access considerations, there's often a lot of extra features that are needed to make a trail truly accessible, and they're not covered in the Americans with Disabilities Act. So start with that, but go further, and the access considerations on our website will help you do that.
And you mentioned new buildings. What is there a year that started, or is there a year that's retroactive to, like, or it's just like starting today, all new buildings have to have?
So the ADA came into law in 1990 was when it first started. Then the most recent one update was 2010. So it's supposed to be, anything since then. Yeah, so it's and ideally things can be retrofitted too that have been built older than that, but it's always more expensive to retrofit than to just design a place from the get-go to be accessible. So yeah, does that answer that question?
I think so.
Kind of vaguely.
Okay, next question. When you work with families and small children, is it appropriate to approach parents with strollers in the same way as people with wheelchairs in terms of access? And is it ever equitable or acceptable to ask them to leave a stroller behind and carry a child if the trail is not inherently accessible? So it might be a little bit outside of your purview, but
I would asking someone to leave something behind is not really being very welcoming or inclusive, and maybe the parent has their own health concerns that they can't carry. Even if it's a little baby, they maybe can't carry the kid. Maybe they've got a dodgy back, maybe they've got something going on with their joints, and actually for the parent it's really important that they can use the stroller. I would really not want you to ask someone to leave a stroller behind. What you could do instead is say, hey, this trail is like this is what the surface is like, blah, blah, blah. I just wanted to let you know in case you wanted to leave your stroller behind. Because that's that thing about like inviting them to opt in rather than forcing them to opt out, which you might be doing if you say, you need to leave your stroller behind. So
even as a parent, it's a little like to hear that would be off-putting and unwelcoming.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I would always try to give people the information so they can make up their own mind. Unless there was some like really key reason that they legitimately couldn't bring the stroller. But hopefully you told them that in the program write-up and they came with that knowledge ahead of time and chose to bring, yeah, I would definitely rather you educate and allow rather than like, you're not welcome here.
And how you said that, a good rule of thumb is that if it's not accessible to a stroller, we're doing something wrong, right? Like if it's not accessible, if a trail isn't accessible to a stroller, then it's not really accessible to a person with other mobility issues or in a wheelchair.
Yeah, absolutely right. And all this stuff we're talking about people who are wheelchair users and have other disabilities and health concerns, but a lot of it applies to people who are using strollers. But yeah, if it was some crazy trail that was really intense or had really big rocks or something, and someone turned up with a stroller, that's really unfortunate. So again, your education in your program write-up, like, hey, this trail isn't going to be accessible for strollers. Maybe bring like a backpack thing for your baby to jump in, the more you can tell people ahead of time, that lets them be informed and allow them to choose if they want to come or not. You're not going to get that perfect every time, but
one of the things that I love that you said earlier, Freya, too, is that people know their abilities best. Give them the information to make the choices on how they approach the trail or the obstacles in front of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you probably don't know what someone can do, and sometimes they don't know what they can do until they try either. So yeah, don't make assumptions, and don't exclude people. Don't force them to opt out. Let them opt in. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, the next question we have is, what characteristics of trails or wildlife viewing areas are most helpful? Parking spaces, access, material on trails, crushed granite or paved or gravel, etc. 32 inches wide is helpful guidance, but I guess with that question, if I could throw some interpretation in there, like where do they start? Like where's the most helpful place to start?
All of it. Well, parking's really important. If someone can't park, they can't. Doesn't matter how good your trail is. If they can't park, they can't get there. The surface is really important a lot of the time. And gradient too. If it's flat, perfectly flat, a lot of times people can do more than just flat. But if it's flat, everyone can do flat. So like that's the ideal. Yeah, start with those three. But yeah, check out the access considerations on our website, which will give you some more information about that stuff. I can see, sorry, I'm not looking at the chat properly, so I don't get really distracted, but I can see Virginia is answering a lot of questions here, which is really awesome. So I'm sorry, Virginia, if I'm not verbalizing your responses, but everybody please look at the chat, because she's throwing in a lot of her experiences and knowledge too.
So available. And okay. Can you suggest some tactile features for interpretive birding? I saw the example of tree bark. What is a birding example?
There is, I just saw it this morning and was reminded. I have a video on our access considerations page. Apparently that's the place all you all need to go. I keep saying it. There's a few videos in there that I've made at different trails talking about the different accessibility features, and there's one in there about tactile interpretive signs, and it was about tree bark too. But on that trail, there was every sign had a tactile component, and there was one that was all about birds, and there was like 3 or 4 different birds. I think there was like an American robin, maybe like a yellow warbler, and a bald eagle, like very different shapes and sizes. Maybe I can't remember what the 4th one might have been, but they were 3D, kind of like, you know, as if the bird kind of was imprinted from underneath and pushed up. So you could feel like the beak shape and the legs, and sort of they were roughly to scale with each other. So you could sort of, oh, the warbler's really little and the eagle's super big. And that was really neat. And they had that kind of signage. They had that one for birds. They had one for like mammals. They had an armadillo, which was clearly a different feeling thing than the snake. You know, that's not a mammal. They had a bunch of, and then there was this one with tree bark. That's the one that I'd made a video about. I really appreciated that. I'm not a botanist. And so without even touching, there were 3 different examples of 3 different trees on this trail and the different bark textures. And without even touching it, I could clearly see the differences the sign was talking about, which really helped me learn and engage with this idea and being able to identify these 3 trees that I now knew about. So I didn't even have to touch it, but because it was a 3D sign, I got to learn. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. You could also have like feathers raised, or like a nest shape, or just different like heads with beaks. That might be kind of weird, just these weird floating heads. But you know, depending on what the sign's talking about, you can make anything really kind of 3D and touchable.
Okay. So the next question asks, I'm curious if Birdability has been successful in collecting data so that if we wanted to pursue advocating for a certain outdoor area to receive improvements to be more accessible. So in going on, especially for city governmental organizations who may be numbers oriented. So how do they quantify that? And then how, since making things more accessible does tend to have some cost to it, and like working with the cities often have, you know, that's a numbers game, and it's related to that there. Can you provide some resources or information that can, number 1, point to the data to help with that? And then number 2, what suggestions do you have for finding funding to support those efforts?
There are heaps and heaps of grants out there for accessibility, for inclusion, and for nature engagement. So I'm just learning about grants myself, being in the position of a brand new nonprofit, but a lot of people have sent me different grants, and those 3 kind of areas, access, inclusion, especially for people with disabilities, and nature engagement, there are often grants around. So go digging. But data, yes. So last year, National Audubon helped us, before we were a nonprofit, just 2 people with a good idea. We had this really fun Birdability Week in October last year, and we're going to have it again this October, and it's going to be even bigger and more exciting. And during the end of October and November, we did a survey for anyone with a disability or other health concern to tell us these sorts of questions. I wanted to collect this sort of data to see where we really needed to focus on. it's been crazy ever since then in terms of like workload. And so I'm still working through that data analysis. So it's not available at the moment, but hopefully at some point, subscribe to our newsletter and you'll find out when we have that information up there, because I would like that information available so that you can say, hey, look, 70% of people with disabilities say accessible trails are the biggest barrier to birding, or whatever the number is. Don't quote me. That's not the number. I don't know what the number is. But the only data that I can think of right now you can get hold of is that stuff that I said at the beginning. 1 in 4 Americans, according to the US Census Bureau, that's not me making it up, has a disability. So that's a huge number of people. And just that, like, I feel like just that data alone should be all they need to justify the expense and the commitment to make places accessible.
The Birdability Map, is it just for the US or is it international, worldwide?
No, totally international. Absolutely. I'm just aware that probably most people here today are from Texas and the US, but no, I'm Australian. I'm very excited that you can toggle it around and add sites anywhere on the planet, and I'm really excited that hopefully soon it will have site reviews from all over the world. There's a couple in Costa Rica and Argentina and Canada, I think, right now. I need to get my parents onto Australia. So yeah, no, totally international, absolutely, please, yes.
Awesome. Great. So obviously there's a lot of questions about trails this morning or this afternoon, and master naturalists work a lot in the trails area, either through leading interpretive hikes or maintaining and developing. One question that came in regarding trails is, are service dogs allowed on trails where other dogs are not allowed?
My understanding, I have to check this. That's a great question. I love being asked questions that I don't know the answer to. My understanding is that a service dog has to be allowed in to any place that is open for people to use, because without the service dog, the person probably can't participate or enter or visit or whatever. So that's my understanding. At least back home in Australia, that's the case. There aren't very many service dogs in like the broader category of service dogs in Australia, but seeing eye dogs, you can't, restaurants and stuff will be like, oh, you're not allowed in here with a dog. And like, actually that's discrimination, that's illegal in Australia. So my background in blindness and low vision services is in Australia, though not in the US, but I'm pretty confident that here, I will double check that. I'm sure that's something we can Google, that service dogs should be allowed anywhere, even if hang on, there may be a few like random exceptions where like it's a legitimate safety issue for the dog, like if there's alligators or like mountain lions and the dog might legit get eaten. And sometimes that's the reason that dogs aren't allowed on certain trails and stuff. So even if it's a service dog, you still don't want your dog getting eaten. So I'll put that little caveat in there. I don't really know the answer, but I would guess that they should be allowed. But yeah, double check that. I will certainly.
Thank you. So and just to remind everyone, we're getting some chatter in the chat. We will provide the chat after the event. So if there are answers that Virginia's including in the chat, we'll copy and paste that into the document after the event. So I know Virginia's been adding things along the way.
Thank you, Virginia.
Yes.
She did. I did see earlier that Virginia popped in something about the surfaces of trails.
Yeah,
she said using a stabilizer. Sorry, using a stabilizer with crushed granite helps to make surfaces accessible. The stabilizer in quotation marks, even if you can't, make it asphalt or concrete or whatever. So, thanks, Virginia. I'm not keeping up with the chat very well.
There's a lot going on there, so it's hard to keep up with. Do you know how much it costs to include Braille on interpretive signs?
I do not know. That is a fantastic question. But Braille on interpretive signs is a really great concept, but often not as useful as you might think it would be, because someone needs to know that it's there. And if you can't see that it's there, how do you know it's there? So Braille, if you have interpretive signs that you don't have an audio is better than Braille because you're going to reach more people than the Braille. You have to be a Braille reader to read Braille, and not everyone who has low vision knows how to read Braille, but having an audio component instead means that everyone can hear it unless they're deaf or hard of hearing. And hopefully, I mean, there are a lot of people who are deafblind as well, but this solution won't help them. But Braille, audio is better than Braille. Braille on signage is well and good, except that often people won't know that it's there. So if you have a visitor center or something where you could have the signage printed in Braille, reach out to your local like Lighthouse for the Blind or like the School for the Blind or something who may be able to help you with printing Braille. It's a whole thing. The Braille printers are like huge because they have to like punch those little dots into the paper that's really thick so that they don't get like punched through. Anyway, it's a whole thing. But having that interpretive signage printed in Braille in like a little booklet thing that someone could just like loan out from the visitor center and take with them and read is probably going to be a lot cheaper, but also a lot more effective for someone who's a Braille reader to use while out on the trail. But better yet would be that audio thing instead.
Okay, a different type of disability. Do you have any ideas for clinical depression and not being able to participate as before? Can you talk about some journaling ideas?
Oh, yes. Well, this is not my area of expertise, but there are a lot of people who doing a lot about slow birding and mindful birding and nature journaling and other ways of engaging with birds or nature that doesn't involve identifying stuff or moving particularly fast or far or any direction. If you Google slow birding, I know the Bird Diva on Instagram, Bridget Butler, she has a website and she's a real big advocate for slow birding. That might be something that you kind of can enjoy in a way that's helpful. Nature journaling. I haven't done a lot of nature journaling. I'm not really an artist. So I don't know a huge amount. That's what I mean. It's not my area of expertise, but there are a lot of people, there are a lot of workshops around. There's lots of people who do a lot of nature journaling who you would be able to find by a bit of a Google, and who might have some really fun ideas. I'm certainly excited when COVID's done. There's an artist here in Alabama who runs nature journaling workshops, and I'm really excited to go do one with him when it's safe, because I would like to know more about that for me, but yeah, so I can also share. There's no wrong way to enjoy birds or to enjoy nature. So even though a lot of people do it by walking in groups, checking things off lists, like that's just one way. And so there's no wrong way to do it unless you're being super destructive or something. Follow the leave no trace principles, but yeah, there's no wrong way to do it. So whatever way kind of works for you, whatever you find brings you joy or helps you connect, like please do it, and don't let any weird cultural pressures make you think that that's not okay, because it is. So yeah, sorry not to have more. That's definitely something we should do. We should have, thank you for that idea, we should have something on our website about slow birding, or like slower, gentler, different ways to engage that aren't necessarily being outside on a trail. So thank you for that question. Sorry if that's not a very helpful answer, but hopefully
no, that's
find some stuff by Google.
Actually, I think I show 127, so I think you had some great summary points within there, and I think that's probably a good place for us to wrap up the day. There's no wrong way to enjoy birds and nature. And so that was a very, that's one of the take-home points I wrote down from your answer of that last question there. Freya, I want to thank you again for being with us. The the chatter, everybody was just so kind and they loved your presentation. So enlightening and informative, giving us lots of things to think about. And I can't think of a better person to kick off our Be the Change series than you and Virginia Rose with us today. So thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for all the information you shared. And we look forward to more collaboration and good things to come.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and thank you everyone for coming. You're already part of the Birdability community just by choosing to learn and listen today. So thank you, and I look forward to hopefully meeting you one day in person or online. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Freya. And then for everybody who's joined us today, we will be posting our next TMN Tuesday presentation. Save the date, April 13th at 12 noon. And that TMN Tuesday presentation is going to cover the affects and effects of Winter Storm Uri. And we'll have more information out on that within the coming weeks. And then our upcoming Be the Change series for April will announce that speaker as well within the coming weeks. So thanks everybody for joining us on Facebook Live. Thank you guys for joining us on WebEx. We're excited that we could host on both platforms for everybody to be able to join us today. All right, thank you. And I'm going to stop the streaming now. Stop the recording now.